Victor Harrow's voice slices through the marble hallway like a whip. What the hell is this kid doing in my private server room? The billionaire stands in the doorway, 6'3" of icy authority, gray suit sharper than a scalpel, eyes burning with rage. And in the center of the room, surrounded by glowing screens and humming machines worth more than entire neighborhoods, stands 14-year-old Malik Johnson, frozen like he's been caught in a crime he doesn't understand. His backpack lies open, spilling out scribbled notebooks full of code, algorithms, and diagrams far too advanced for any freshman student, let alone a poor black boy who spends his evenings waiting for his mother to finish cleaning toilets in this mansion. Victor strides in, every step echoing with wealth, power, and something darker. He grabs Malik by the collar, not enough to injure, but enough to remind him who owns the air in this building. "Are you out of your mind?" Victor snarls. "My servers process trillions of dollars, and you, a maid's son, think you can just wander in and start hacking my system." Malik's voice cracks. "Sir, I wasn't hacking anything, I swear. The screen just—" But Victor's face twists with disgust so sharp it could cut glass. "Save it, kids like you always have excuses, always touching what doesn't belong to you." Malik's mother, Renee, bursts in moments later, breathless, terrified, still wearing her cleaning gloves. She pulls her son behind her like she's shielding him from a storm. "Please, Mr. Harrow, he's just a child. He didn't mean any harm." Victor steps even closer, voice dripping acid. "You're lucky I don't call the police right now. I spend billions on world-class engineers, and some street kid thinks he understands my system." Behind them, several mansion staff stand frozen in the hallway, staring in horror. They've seen Victor angry, but never like this. Renee whispers, "Please don't fire me, we need this job." Victor's lip curls. "Then maybe teach your son to stay where he belongs." But as Victor turns toward the glowing screens, something on the monitors makes him halt mid-breath. A system error, the same one that's drained $2 billion from his empire over the last year, is suddenly gone. No crash, no glitch. Just fixed. He slowly faces Malik again, this time not with rage, but disbelief. What they didn't know would change everything. Malik Johnson wasn't born into a world that expected anything from him. At 14, he moved the way kids move when life has taught them to stay small, hands in pockets, shoulders tucked in, eyes always scanning for the next adult who might misunderstand him. But behind those quiet eyes lived a mind wired differently. While other kids played video games, Malik tried to understand how the games themselves were built. He could spend hours staring at broken electronics, trying to imagine what the original engineer had meant the machine to do. He fixed old phones for neighbors, repaired dying tablets for kids at school, even rebuilt a rusted laptop he found in a dumpster behind the community center. Nobody taught him how. He learned by instinct, by curiosity, by a kind of raw genius that didn't ask permission before showing up. But genius means little when the world is too busy surviving to recognize it. Malik and his mother lived in a cramped basement apartment where the ceiling leaked when it rained and the heater clicked like it was coughing. His notebooks were stacked everywhere, on the bed, under the bed, on the kitchen counter, each page crammed with sketches of circuits, graphs, lines of code he didn't want anyone to see, not because he was ashamed, but because he'd learned that adults rarely celebrate brilliance in kids like him. They fear it, they question it, or they break it. His mother, Renee, carried the weight of that truth more heavily than he did. She worked 6 nights a week cleaning the mansion of billionaire tech mogul Victor Harrow. She scrubbed floors that cost more than her yearly income and polished stair rails carved by designers whose names she couldn't pronounce. By the time she got home at sunrise, her legs shook, but she never let Malik see that. She always told him, "Your mind is your doorway. Don't let anyone seal it shut." Renee didn't want Malik anywhere near Victor's private offices. She had seen what happened to staff who made even the smallest mistake. Security escorted them out before they could finish collecting their things. One wrong move could end her entire livelihood, so she kept Malik close when she worked overnight. Sometimes he slept in a supply closet with his backpack as a pillow. Sometimes he napped in a corner of the laundry room where she could keep an eye on him. As long as no one complained, Victor never noticed. Still, Malik was drawn to the mansion's forbidden wing, not because he wanted to break rules. He simply couldn't resist the glow of the screens spilling out from Victor's office door. Once when passing by, he caught a glimpse of scrolling code through the narrow crack in the doorway. His heart jumped. He recognized patterns instantly, patterns he'd only ever seen in advanced programming textbooks he downloaded illegally from library Wi-Fi. He didn't understand why a billionaire needed that much processing power, or why the room hummed like a heart full of secrets. But he felt something, a pull, like the room itself was whispering, "Come see what you could be." Renee noticed the way Malik lingered near that hallway. She pulled him aside more than once, telling him, "Baby, people like us survive by staying invisible." He nodded. He tried. But invisible is a hard thing to be when your mind is full of questions too big for the world around you. At school, Malik's teachers labeled him unfocused. They said he finished tests too fast, that he doodled too much, that he didn't raise his hand enough. They didn't see that he finished early because the work bored him, that his doodles were actually flowcharts, that he didn't raise his hand because every time he did, the room went quiet in a way that made him feel like his intelligence was a threat instead of a gift. He learned to shrink himself, to look at the floor when questioned, to hide his brilliance as if protecting it from hands that didn't know how to hold it. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Victor Harrow was slipping into a private panic. His billion-dollar system, his pride, his empire, had been glitching for months. Engineers from MIT, Stanford, and 20 foreign labs had flown in and flown out defeated. Every crash cost him millions. Every failure chipped at his reputation as a genius, and Victor Harrow could not tolerate the idea of losing control. He didn't know a quiet black boy passed his office door every night. He didn't know that boy noticed the same blinking server error every time he walked by. He didn't know that Malik studied the system the way artists study paintings, by feeling. Everything was about to collide in one moment. A moment born not from rebellion, but from curiosity. A moment that would shift the lives of the billionaire who thought he knew everything, and the boy the world refused to see. And neither of them had any idea how much depended on the next decision Malik would make. The night everything changed began like any other shift for Renee Johnson. She clocked in quietly, invisible as always, pushing her cleaning cart past marble pillars and glass walls that reflected a world she could never fully enter. Malik walked beside her, silent, hugging his backpack to his chest. He had promised her he would stay in the supply room and finish his assignments. He always promised. But promises meant little to a mind that couldn't stop chasing problems the world had failed to solve. Teknova Tower felt like another planet to Malik. A place humming with energy, sharp blue lights, and screens that never slept. A place where thousands of minds were paid fortunes to do what he dreamed of doing for free. He didn't understand how the building could contain so many brilliant people, yet the system kept crashing every night at the exact same hour. He noticed it the very first time he came with his mother. A pattern, a rhythm, a flaw. He had tried to ignore it, tried to focus on math worksheets and science reviews. But patterns whispered to him. And tonight, the whisper turned into a pull he couldn't resist. Renee moved to the executive floor, starting her routine. She wiped, dusted, polished, moving with the tired precision of someone whose body no longer asked permission. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the supply room door, listening for any sign that her son had wandered. She didn't hear anything. She never imagined he had slipped away minutes after she turned the corner. Malik moved like a shadow along the hallway, passing sleek doors with biometric locks and glass walls overlooking the city skyline. He followed the hum, the deeper vibration beneath the building's surface. It led him to a room marked Authorized Personnel Only. The server room, a place he had only seen through half-open doors before. A place where the heartbeat of Teknova lived. The door wasn't fully shut tonight. A tiny misalignment, probably from the last engineer rushing out. It was enough space for a determined kid to slip through. Cold air hit him like a wave. Rows of tall black server towers blinked in synchronized pulses, like thousands of digital eyes. Cables twisted along the floor like metallic veins feeding a giant. Malik stood there for a few seconds, breath caught in his throat. He felt small, but he also felt alive. This was a puzzle begging to be solved. He walked toward a cluster of screens displaying lines of code, scrolling endlessly. Error logs, warnings, failures, the famous Teknova crash. It wasn't random. Not to him. He sat cross-legged on the floor, pulling out his notebook filled with scribbles, patterns, and sketches he couldn't show anyone. He opened a spare keyboard a technician had thrown out months ago, the one he secretly repaired. He connected it to an open port. The system accepted him, not because he bypassed security, but because the damage inside the network was so deep, so mismanaged, that the internal permissions were riddled with holes. He wasn't breaking in. The system was just broken. Lines of corrupted code flashed on the screen. He began typing, faster than he ever had in his life. Not changing anything, just tracing the logic, mapping the flaw, understanding the heartbeat of the glitch. He realized something shocking. It wasn't a software bug at all. It was a timing failure. A flaw buried in the synchronization layer of Technova's most expensive product. A flaw worth billions in losses. He started sketching a fix in his notebook. A simple realignment. A recalibration of data packets. Something elegant. Something the MIT engineers had overlooked, because sometimes the smartest people can't see what a quiet kid notices instantly. As he worked, he forgot the world around him. Forgot curfews, forgotten rules, forgotten consequences. For a few moments, he wasn't a maid's son. He wasn't poor. He wasn't invisible. He was exactly who he truly was. A prodigy solving a billion-dollar mystery, alone on a cold server room floor. But above him, beyond the steel racks, a red camera light blinked awake. Not because it detected a security breach, but because Victor Harrow himself had returned early to the building. Victor's insomnia was legendary. He often wandered the tower at strange hours, restless, irritable, unable to sleep knowing his empire was falling apart under a problem no one could fix. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed the server room door slightly open. His mood snapped instantly. He marched toward it, and the whole building seemed to tighten its breath. Inside, Malik didn't hear his footsteps. He was too focused, too deep inside the logic. Victor stopped in the doorway, eyes widening, rage flooding his chest before understanding even had a chance to form. A black boy. A poor boy. A maid's boy. Inside Asterisk his Asterisk server room. Touching Asterisk his Asterisk systems. Sitting like he belonged there. The sight alone triggered every prejudice he held buried under polished suits and public smiles. He stormed forward, and the moment Malik looked up, the world crashed down on him. Victor yanked him by the arm so violently, the keyboard clattered across the floor. Malik gasped, dropping his notebook filled with diagrams. Victor's voice filled the room like a verdict. A judgment. A punishment. He saw papers with complex formulas. He assumed theft. He saw a kid with a repaired keyboard. He assumed hacking. He saw a black child where only elite engineers were allowed. He assumed crime. By the time Renee heard the yelling and came running, Victor was dragging her son out of the server room, holding the back of his hoodie like a criminal caught in the act. She froze. Her face went pale, because she knew instantly what this meant. Termination. Eviction. Possibly police. Possibly worse. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked before words could form. Victor's rage grew louder. He paced, holding the notebook, waving pages in the air like evidence. Employees in nearby glass offices stood frozen, watching the scene like a public execution. Renee fell to her knees, gathering her son's scattered papers, apologizing, pleading, whispering his name with heartbreak. But Victor didn't hear her. He couldn't, because humiliation had already swallowed him whole. He didn't know yet that the boy he was screaming at had just stabilized his entire failing empire. He didn't know that in the last 2 hours, Technova's servers had reached the longest streak of stability in 2 years. He didn't know a 14-year-old from the hood had solved the problem his elite team couldn't understand. And right now, he didn't care. All he saw was someone he believed didn't belong. A maid's son. A poor black child. a threat to his authority, and he was about to make the worst mistake of his life. Victor Harrow stood in the center of the open floor like a storm ready to swallow everything in reach. His voice rose higher, harsher, echoing off every glass wall. Malik kept his eyes down, not because he was guilty, but because he learned long ago that eye contact with an angry man only invites more violence. Renee reached for her son, her hands trembling, her knees still on the polished floor. She kept whispering, trying to explain, trying to find words that wouldn't make everything worse. She couldn't. Nothing she said mattered to a man who already decided who they were. Victor held up Malik's notebook again, pages filled with calculations, rewritten code structures, timing graphs. Pages any engineer would instantly recognize as brilliant, but he wasn't looking at brilliance. He was looking at a threat to his pride. He stepped closer to Malik, invading the boy's space with the full weight of his authority. He demanded to know who taught him to do this, who helped him break in, who else was involved. He threw accusation after accusation, each one louder, each one dripping with a prejudice he didn't bother hiding. Employees had gathered along the upper levels, leaning over railings, watching in disbelief. Some looked sympathetic, others afraid, a few curious, but none stepped forward. No one dared interrupt the billionaire who signed their paychecks. But someone else noticed something different. On the far side of the floor, behind a transparent glass wall, Dr. Lena Carter, head of engineering, stared at her monitoring screen in confusion. She had been running diagnostics all night, expecting the usual crash, the usual failure alert at the stroke of midnight. It hadn't happened. Instead, the system had been running cleaner, smoother, faster than she had ever seen. It was impossible. No update had been pushed. No engineer was on call. Nothing in their logs showed recent intervention. But then she saw an anomaly, a temporary port connection, a brief rerouting, a change in data packet timing, something so precise, so elegant, she almost doubted her own eyes. She stepped back, heart racing. Someone touched the system tonight. Someone solved something the entire engineering division had failed to understand for 2 years. She turned toward the noise and saw Victor holding a notebook over his head like a weapon. Something inside her tightened, a suspicion, a possibility so outrageous it almost made her laugh. She walked out of the lab and headed toward the chaos. Meanwhile, Victor continued tearing into Renee. He blamed her, told her she raised a criminal, told her she brought shame into his building, told her she should have known better. Renee swallowed every insult because she needed her job. Malik watched every insult because he needed to protect his mother. His small hand curled into a fist around the strap of his backpack, but he didn't raise it. He had been taught that defending himself only created more danger. Victor pointed at the security office and ordered them to call the police. Renee gasped and grabbed his arm instinctively. She begged him not to. She explained they would lose their home, explained they would have nowhere to go, explained it wasn't what he thought. He pulled his arm away from her like her touch was poison. Security moved, radios crackled. The officers on duty hesitated, but Victor's glare was enough to push them into action. Malik's breathing grew sharp, not from fear of jail, but from the fear of what jail would do to his mother if she lost him. He clutched her hand tightly. She kissed the top of his head with tears running down her cheek. Lena arrived just as security began walking toward them. She asked what happened, her tone calm but her eyes scanning every detail. Victor waved the notebook in her face, telling her the boy was hacking the system, that he broke into the server room, that he nearly jeopardized the entire company. Lena took the notebook from him. She flipped through the pages. Her pulse jumped. She saw the timing diagrams, saw the corrected sequence, saw the solution, something only a mind born for engineering could create. She looked at Malik. The boy didn't look up, but she saw the intelligence in the way he held himself, the quiet discipline, the restraint, the brilliance hidden beneath fear. She asked Malik a simple question. What was he trying to do? Victor yelled that the boy wasn't allowed to speak, that he was lying, that he was manipulating them. But the more Victor yelled, the more Lena noticed something Victor didn't. Malik wasn't nervous about the accusations. He was nervous because he thought he had done something wrong mathematically. His eyes kept flicking toward the notebook like he wanted to fix just one more thing. Lena told him to explain anyway. His voice was soft at first, barely above a whisper. He said the system had a flaw in the synchronization layer. He said the crash happened at the same interval every night. He said he noticed a repeating pattern months ago. He said he had an idea to repair the timing. Victor interrupted him repeatedly, trying to shut him down. But Lena held up a hand and silenced the billionaire in front of his entire staff. She asked Malik to continue. He explained the logic, the recalibration, the alignment of the timestamps, the corrupted packets, the way he'd mapped the pattern, the way he'd tested a repair idea without changing anything in the system itself. He talked like someone who didn't realize adults weren't supposed to listen to him. Lena didn't blink the entire time. She felt something rare, awe. When Malik finished, Victor laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. He insisted everything Malik said was impossible. He claimed the boy was lying. He claimed the notebook was faked. He claimed none of this meant anything. Lena quietly walked back to her monitoring screen. She typed a command. She pulled up the system logs for the last 2 hours. Every technician nearby leaned in. Her eyes widened. There it was. A temporary manual fix. A perfect correction to the exact flaw the engineering division had been hunting for 2 years. Not a guess. Not an accident. A solution. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting Victor's. She said the sentence that changed everything. The boy didn't hack the system. He stabilized it. A ripple went through the room. Gasps. Whispers. People staring at Malik with new eyes. Victor froze, color draining from his face. Security stopped moving instantly. Lena kept going. She told Victor the system hadn't crashed all night. She said the correction in the timing was precise enough to fix the entire synchronization problem. She said the logs showed exactly when the temporary fix was applied. She said one more thing, louder so everyone could hear. The only reason Technova is still running right now is because this kid saved it. Renee covered her mouth, tears streaming. Malik finally looked up, eyes wide, confused, overwhelmed. Victor stepped back like he'd been struck. The boy he tried to humiliate. The boy he called a criminal. The boy he tried to throw out. Had succeeded where his entire engineering team had failed. But the shock wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because Victor Hara wasn't a man who handled humiliation well. He didn't celebrate Malik's brilliance. He didn't apologize. He didn't soften. His pride twisted into something darker. He glared at Malik with a new kind of hatred. A hatred born not from superiority, but from fear. Fear that a boy he tried to crush had just proven himself more capable than every expert he ever hired. And in that moment, Victor decided something quietly, dangerously. He would never let a poor black kid make him look weak. Even if the entire world saw the truth. Even if Technova owed its survival to Malik. Victor Hara wasn't done. He was just getting started. For the first time since the confrontation began, the entire building stood silent. But it wasn't peaceful silence. It was a silence full of tension, embarrassment, shock, and something else simmering beneath the surface, fear of what Victor Hara would do next. Lena crouched near Malik, leveling her gaze with his. She asked if she could see the part of the system he adjusted. Malik hesitated and looked at his mother. Renee nodded faintly, still shaken. Only then did the boy step forward. He walked over to the nearest terminal with small, careful steps, like he expected someone to yank him back again. His fingers hovered above the keys. The entire engineering team watched from behind the glass as the child pulled up the logs, tracing the exact moment he made the correction. Lena's jaw tightened. She whispered to herself that the fix was elegant, precise, and mathematically sound, not guesswork, not luck, not something a child should even know how to think about. But Malik wasn't thinking like a child. He was thinking like a mind born for this work. Victor tried to dismiss it, saying the system probably fixed itself. He insisted kids copy things from the internet. He kept talking, but Lena wasn't listening anymore. She was studying the boy, studying the numbers, studying the pattern. She asked Malik a question that made the whole room go still. How long have you been seeing this pattern? Malik's answer came out quietly. Since the first night my mom brought me here. Lena inhaled sharply. Malik's voice remained soft, steady, but the depth of what he said shook her. He had been observing a billion-dollar failure casually, as if it were a homework problem. He had memorized its behavior. He had mapped it in secret. Victor's frustration snapped. He declared the conversation over and tried to pull the notebook from Lena's hands, saying it was Technova property now. Lena stepped back and held the notebook tightly against her chest. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply said the words that froze him. This notebook belongs to him, and so does the intellectual property inside it. Dozens of employees witnessed it. Phones weren't out, but eyes were recording every second. Victor felt the room slipping from his control, and he hated it. He forced a calm smile, the kind he only used when public perception mattered more than truth. He told everyone he only reacted strongly because he thought there was a security risk. He said he didn't mean to escalate things. He tried to rewrite the story in real time. No one believed him. Renee gathered her son's backpack, still shaking, still whispering apologies. She told Malik they needed to leave. They needed to get away before things got worse. But Lena stepped forward and stopped them, not with force, with a quiet request. She asked if Malik would come with her to the lab for just a few minutes. She promised Renee she could come too. She promised no one would touch him again. Renee hesitated. She didn't trust these walls. This place had already tried to crush her son. But Malik tugged her sleeve gently and whispered that he could show her what he fixed. Something inside his voice cracked her heart in half, pride mixed with fear. They followed Lena. Victor followed too, not because he wanted to, but because he refused to let control slip further. The engineering lab felt different from the rest of Technova Tower. It was quieter, warmer, filled with scattered prototypes and whiteboards covered in equations. Malik's eyes widened at the sight of it, not in awe, in recognition, like he had been dreaming of a place like this his whole life. Lena pointed him toward a terminal. She asked him to show, step by step, how he understood the timing issue. He did. He didn't stumble. He didn't second-guess. He spoke about system processes and architecture like other kids speak about video games. Every engineer in the lab slowly gathered around him, drawn in by the way his mind worked. They recognized brilliance in real time. They recognized something Victor refused to accept. Renee watched everything from the corner, hands clenched together, her nerves stretched thin. She didn't understand the technical details, but she understood one thing clearly. Her son was special, and for the first time, someone who mattered could see it. But Victor's expression hardened as the minutes passed. He wasn't impressed. He was threatened. The more Malik spoke, the tighter Victor's jaw locked, because every sentence the boy said made it clear that the company's 2-year catastrophe was solvable. And worse, solvable by someone Victor tried to humiliate. He couldn't allow the world to know that a Maid's son succeeded where his 6-figure engineers failed. His empire ran on the belief that people like Malik didn't belong in a place like this. If the world learned the truth, he wouldn't just look incompetent. He would look small, and Victor Harrow would burn the world down before he ever looked small. Amelia's heart froze for a moment, like someone had pressed pause on time. She couldn't understand why she was standing there and why she wasn't moving. Her breath came in shallow bursts, yet she stayed rooted in place. The boy looked up, closing his torn notebook softly. A faint, careful smile appeared. I'm just doing homework. The guard wouldn't let me sit outside," he said quietly. Amelia didn't respond, but for a fraction of a second, confusion crossed her face, as if she wanted to speak but words couldn't reach her. He glanced around the empty corridor and leaned a little closer, his voice low, careful. "I hum here because silence feels too heavy sometimes." Something in Amelia shifted. Her face softened. She realized she was staring and she couldn't look away. The boy didn't seem like a thief. He didn't seem like trouble. He seemed alive, full of small, quiet courage despite his tiny, worn-out frame. Amelia felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. This child, whom the world treated as invisible, was claiming his space with nothing but intellect and presence. "You always hum," she finally whispered, her voice cracking slightly. The boy shrugged. "Only at night. It helps me think, helps me keep from breaking things that don't need to be broken." Amelia swallowed hard. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of understanding, maybe even respect, for someone her own world would never acknowledge. She could see it in the lines of his hands, in the way his eyes scanned the terminal screens, in the careful precision of his movements. The building seemed impossibly quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from absence, but from tension, from waiting. Every shadow along the hallway felt alive, every reflected light a witness to this tiny, electric encounter. Malik the boy finally spoke again. I fixed something once, by accident, but it mattered, no one knew, no one even looked. Emilia felt a pang in her chest. She knew that loneliness. She had lived it. She knew what it was like to work, to sacrifice, to hide brilliance so it wouldn't be punished. She took a step closer. What did you fix? Malik hesitated, glancing toward the server room doors where Victor's light still glowed faintly in the distance. It was the main system. The crashes, they stopped. Nobody knew why. Emilia's eyes widened. She barely understood the words, but the meaning hit her. This boy, this child she had barely noticed, had done something miraculous, something that no one had expected. And yet he didn't look proud, he didn't look triumphant. He looked scared, scared that someone would see him, judge him, or take it all away. You did this alone, Emilia whispered. Yes, he said softly. I was just curious, I didn't mean anything bad. Emilia felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to hug him, protect him, tell him that the world wasn't always cruel. But she also knew it was cruel. She could see the danger in the shadows, in the building's gleaming walls, in the people watching, in the empire that could crush him for a single mistake. Suddenly, a voice called from behind them. Renee, Malik. Victor Harrow's booming tone filled the hallway. Every nerve in Emilia's body stiffened. She knew this was the moment she had feared. Victor appeared in the doorway, his suit perfectly tailored, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. What the hell is going on here? He demanded. Explain why my system, my billion-dollar system, is being tampered with by a child. Malik froze, but he didn't run. He looked at Victor, eyes wide, heart pounding. I fixed it, he stammered. Victor's eyes narrowed. You fixed it. Yes, the crashes, they stopped. I didn't know it would matter. I just followed the pattern, Malik said softly, almost apologetically. Victor's rage twisted into disbelief. His hands clenched at his sides. How a child fixes what my top engineers couldn't in 2 years. Emilia stepped in front of Malik, her voice shaking but firm. He didn't break anything, Mr. Harrow. He helped. He didn't know he was helping a billionaire's system. He just did what was right. Victor laughed bitterly, a sharp, hollow sound. Right. A child shouldn't even be near this system. Do you know what he could have done? Steal information, destroy data, ruin the company. Malik's small hands trembled, but he stayed silent. Victor's rage grew, echoing off the glass walls. Do you understand what 2 years of work, billions of dollars wasted in a single night, by a child, by a maid's son? Emilia's knees shook. She could barely hold back tears. He's not a criminal. He's smarter than anyone you've ever met. He saved your system, don't you see that? Victor paused, his chest heaving. For the first time, shock replaced rage. He looked at Malik differently. There was fear, yes, but also a grudging recognition. He didn't admit it, he didn't smile, he didn't thank them. But in that moment, his entire demeanor shifted. The employees pressed against the glass, watching silently. They were witnessing history, the billionaire confronted with brilliance in the smallest, most unexpected form. Malik looked down, clutching his notebook, unsure of whether to be proud or terrified. Emilia reached for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. It's okay, she whispered. You did good. Victor's gaze lingered on Malik a moment longer, calculating, scheming, trying to decide if he could exploit this brilliance, or if he would destroy it to protect his pride. Somewhere deep inside, Malik knew the truth. His life would never be the same. One mistake, one act of courage, one accidental solution had changed everything. And he hadn't even meant to. The tension didn't leave the building for hours. Malik and his mother followed Lena into the engineering lab, the glow of monitors reflecting off their faces. For the first time, Malik didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, but the weight of what had just happened pressed down on him like a storm. The engineers gathered around quietly, peeking over their keyboards. Some whispered to each other, others just stared. No one had ever seen a child articulate system architecture so clearly, so perfectly, so instinctively. Lena guided Malik to a terminal and asked him to demonstrate the fix, step by step. As he typed, the pattern became clear. Every calculation, every adjustment, every subtle tweak had been done intuitively. Lena watched in awe. This wasn't luck. This wasn't copying. This was brilliance, raw and untrained, forged in secrecy, necessity, and survival. Malik's hands flew over the keys, his eyes scanning logs, screens, and graphs. He explained the flaw, how it created nightly crashes, and how his adjustments stabilized the system. The engineers murmured. Some shook their heads in disbelief. 2 years of exhaustive work had failed, and a 12-year-old had solved it in a single night. Renee watched silently from the side, her heart swelling with pride and fear. Her son's life had always been invisible to the world, but now everyone was staring, and she knew it could turn ugly at any moment. Victor Harrow hadn't left. He loomed outside the lab, silent, calculating, his pride wounded and his control shaken. When Malik finished, Lena pulled up the system logs. The results were undeniable. The crashes had stopped. The servers were running smoother than ever. Every engineer nodded, some muttering incredulously under their breath. Malik's adjustments had corrected the timing flaw perfectly. Victor stepped forward, his face a storm of disbelief and fury. "Impossible," he spat. "This child did what my entire team couldn't do in years." Malik looked down, his voice quiet. I just noticed the pattern. I didn't know it mattered." Victor laughed bitterly, a sound that echoed off the walls. Not know it mattered. You could have destroyed the company, you." Lena raised a hand, stopping him. "He didn't destroy anything. In fact, he fixed what we couldn't. This child just saved the system." Victor froze, then his eyes narrowed. Pride and ego warred with the truth in front of him. He had no words, no angle, no power that could erase what had happened. But he didn't forgive. He didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge the brilliance he had tried to punish. Instead, he plotted. Every step Malik had taken, every glance, every page of the notebook was now under his scrutiny. He would not be outdone by a Maid's son, by someone he considered beneath his empire. He would find a way to control it, or crush it. Malik sensed the change in Victor, but he stayed calm. He had learned to survive. Silence was often safer than argument, and brilliance could be dangerous when misjudged. He looked at Lena and nodded, letting her guide the conversation. Renee finally exhaled, squeezing Malik's shoulder. The tension left her body in small increments, replaced by relief and awe. Her son had done something extraordinary, and no one could ever take that away. But the world outside these walls still had rules, dangers, and biases she feared. Over the next few hours, Lena worked with Malik to document his solution. Engineers listened, asking questions, testing scenarios, confirming the fix. Malik responded patiently, meticulously, showing them how even a minor misalignment had caused billions in potential losses. Outside the lab, Victor remained. He watched silently, not intervening, not praising, but absorbing. The employees in the hallways whispered, sharing the story, spreading awe. The rumor of a 12-year-old who had solved a 2-year billion-dollar problem traveled fast. Victor finally spoke, his voice low but sharp. "This changes everything," he muttered. Not a compliment, not recognition, just acknowledgement of a threat he couldn't ignore. He would have to adjust, recalculate, rethink his empire. And in the back of his mind, a grudging respect began to form. Malik didn't notice. He focused on the system, on the screens, on the logic, on the solution. For once, he wasn't hiding in the shadows. For once, his mind and heart were fully engaged, fully recognized, fully alive. Renee watched her son, pride and fear intertwined. She knew that after this night, nothing would be the same. Opportunities, dangers, recognition, challenges, all awaited. But she also knew that Malik had something that no amount of money, prejudice, or power could ever take away. His brilliance, his integrity, his courage. By morning, Technova's servers were stable. The engineers marveled, the building buzzed with new energy, and Malik quietly returned to his backpack in the supply closet like nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. He had touched a billion-dollar empire with his mind, and the world had seen him. Victor watched from the shadows, silent, calculating. He would have to decide, punish, control, or acknowledge. The empire would survive, but nothing about it would ever feel the same again. And in that quiet lab, under the hum of monitors and the glow of screens, a small boy and his mother understood one undeniable truth. Brilliance does not ask permission, and sometimes the smallest hands can change the biggest world. The next morning, the office floor was quieter than usual. Not silent, but wary. Whispers bounced off the glass walls, hushed and hesitant. Everyone had seen the impossible the night before. A 12-year-old had solved a 2-year, multi-billion-dollar problem. But while the engineers marveled, Victor Harrow's presence cast a shadow across the entire building. He stood by the main staircase, sharp suit, cold glare, watching Malik like a hawk tracking prey. He hadn't slept all night, not because he was impressed, but because his mind was racing. A child. A child had outperformed his elite engineers. The thought was intolerable and yet undeniable. Renee clutched Malik's hand, guiding him past employees who stole glances, whispers rising with every step. Malik's small fingers gripped hers tightly, and for the first time he didn't flinch under stares. He carried something that night could never erase, proof of his genius. Victor finally called an emergency board meeting, summoning Lena, the engineers, Renee, and Malik into the grand conference room. The space was cold, intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city beyond, and sunlight reflected off the polished marble, blinding some, exposing others. Victor sat at the head of the table, hands clasped, jaw rigid. "Explain this to me," he demanded, voice sharp, slicing through the room. "Explain how a child solves what my entire team failed to fix in 2 years. I want answers, now." Malik's eyes flickered toward Lena. She nodded slightly, silently telling him to stay calm. Malik inhaled. His small voice filled the cavernous room. "The system was crashing because of a timing flaw. The data packets, they were misaligned. I noticed the pattern while my mom worked nights here. I tried a solution that corrected the timing, and it worked. That's all." Victor laughed bitterly. That's all. You risked the company, disrupted operations, and you call that all." Malik's gaze dropped to the table. "I didn't mean to risk anything. I just saw the problem and wanted to fix it." Victor slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. "Do you understand what you're saying? You just waltzed in and fixed billions of dollars worth of work, and you think it's simple, that it's okay." Renee's voice shook as she spoke, finally stepping forward. "He didn't hurt anyone, he didn't steal anything. He saved your system, that's all he ever wanted to do." Victor's glare shifted toward her. "You let this happen? You, a mother, a maid, you let a child tamper with my company. Do you understand the stakes?" "Yes," Renee whispered. "But he didn't do it for fame or money. He did it because he could, because he's brilliant." Lena interjected, voice calm but firm. "Victor, look at the logs, look at the data. The system hasn't crashed in over 72 hours. Malik's solution worked. This isn't an accident, this isn't luck. This is intellect, pure problem-solving skill." Victor's jaw tightened. The room waited, breaths held. No one moved. He had always controlled this company, these people, this world. And yet here was undeniable proof that he had no control over this child. He stood abruptly, pacing like a predator circling its prey. "So you're telling me that my elite engineers paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year couldn't fix the system, and a child did it?" "Yes," Lena said, meeting his gaze. "And you need to acknowledge it, not because he's a child, but because it's true." Victor's fingers flexed against his sides. He couldn't deny it, but pride would not let him admit it openly. Instead, his voice dropped lower, calculated, threatening. "If the world ever finds out that a child, a maid's son, corrected my system, that my empire relied on him, there will be consequences." Malik's small voice trembled but held steady. "I just wanted to help. I didn't ask for anything." Victor's eyes bore into him. He could smell fear. He could smell potential. He could smell the power that this child now possessed, and that frightened him more than anything. "You should have left it alone," Victor said, low and dangerous. "You don't understand what's at stake. One mistake and everything could crumble. One wrong move and your mother, your life, all gone." Renee stepped closer to Malik, protective, furious. "He understands more than you think, and he's done more for this company than anyone realizes. Don't threaten him, Victor." The billionaire's gaze flickered to her, then back to Malik. For the first time, a small flicker of respect, or at least calculation, crossed his face. But it was fleeting. He wasn't a man who forgave easily. He wasn't a man who celebrated brilliance outside his control. Malik swallowed, finally finding the courage to meet Victor's eyes. "I only fixed it because it was broken. That's all. I didn't do it to prove anything to anyone. I just wanted to make it right." A hush fell over the room. The tension was electric. Everyone waited for Victor's next move. He could crush them, dismiss them, take credit, or acknowledge the truth. Every choice carried consequences for him and for Malik. Victor's hands tightened into fists. He stared at Malik. He stared at Renee. He stared at Lena. And then something unexpected happened. He exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, the first sign of softness in hours. "Get him out of my sight," Victor said finally, voice firm but subdued. "And keep the system stable." It wasn't praise, it wasn't admiration, but it was acknowledgement. Malik, Renee, and Lena exchanged glances. Relief and awe mingled in the air. Malik had survived the storm. More than that, he had survived Victor Harrow's judgment. He had done what no one else could. Outside the boardroom, employees whispered, staring. They had witnessed the impossible, the child who had outperformed the Empire's best. Some were inspired, some were terrified, but all knew one truth: brilliance cannot be contained by wealth, status, or prejudice. Victor retreated to his office alone. His empire remained intact, but his pride had been challenged. Deep inside, he knew he couldn't ignore Malik's talent forever. It was only a matter of time before the world saw what he had tried to hide. And for Malik, the boy who had spent years in shadows, hiding his mind and his gifts, the world had just cracked open. One night, one accidental solution, one confrontation, had changed everything. He looked at his mother. She smiled through tears, pride and fear intertwining. He looked at Lena. She nodded, respect and admiration clear in her eyes. And he knew in that moment that no matter what Victor decided next, he had proven something undeniable. Intelligence, courage, and integrity can thrive in the most unexpected places, and even the smallest hand can change the biggest world. Malik closed his notebook gently, almost reverently. The hum of the servers seemed to echo his heartbeat, steady and strong. And in that rhythm, he realized something profound. Survival wasn't enough anymore. Now it was about claiming the space he deserved, and no one, not even Victor Harrow, could take that away. The office floor felt different the next morning. The energy had shifted. Whispers still circulated, but now they carried awe, admiration, and disbelief rather than fear. Malik walked beside his mother, Renee, and Lena, carrying his notebook carefully like a treasured possession. He felt the weight of what had happened settle on him, not as pressure, but as quiet acknowledgement. He had survived Victor Harrow's storm. He had not just survived, he had changed the course of the company. In the lab, engineers quietly nodded to Malik as he passed. Some smiled, some whispered words of encouragement. It was subtle, but for a 12-year-old who had spent nights hidden in supply closets, every small gesture was monumental. For years, he had been unseen, underestimated, overlooked. Now even the brightest minds of Technova could not ignore him. Lena led them to a small break area, away from the prying eyes of Victor and the main floor. She placed a gentle hand on Malik's shoulder. "You did something incredible," she said softly. "Not just for the system, but for everyone who doubted you. You showed them what they refused to see." Malik shifted, his eyes downcast, voice quiet. "I didn't do it to prove anything," he said. "I just wanted it fixed. I wanted it right. I didn't think anyone would notice." Renee hugged him tightly, whispering into his ear. "Oh, Malik, you have no idea how many people are noticing now. How proud I am of you, words can't explain it. You didn't just fix a system, you reminded everyone what real courage and brilliance look like." Malik hugged her back, but there was still a trace of fear in his eyes. He had seen Victor's face, had felt the tension of his judgment. The world of power, wealth, and authority had brushed against him, and he had survived. But what would happen next? Would Victor try to control him, manipulate him, or erase him entirely? Lena spoke, breaking through the uncertainty. "No one can erase you. Not your ideas, not your work, not your talent. You have a choice now, Malik. You can step into the light or you can stay hidden. The world will notice either way, but only you decide how to meet it." Malik looked at the glowing monitors in the lab, then at the engineers studying the system he had fixed. He realized something profound. For the first time in his life, his intellect had value beyond survival, beyond hiding, beyond mere recognition. It had the power to change lives, to stabilize empires, to prove that brilliance exists in every corner of the world, no matter how invisible. The day moved forward slowly, almost surreal. Meetings were called, executives whispered in corners, and the rumor of the Maid's son who saved the system spread like wildfire. Employees who had once ignored him, judged him, or assumed his insignificance now looked at him with awe. They weren't just impressed, they were unsettled by the truth. Genius doesn't respect social class, race, or expectation. Victor Harrow, however, remained silent and calculated. He watched from his office, evaluating every step Malik took. For the first time, he realized that raw brilliance couldn't be confined by ego or prejudice. Yet, pride kept him from openly acknowledging Malik's achievement. He would need time to reconcile his empire's fragility with the undeniable truth that a child from a humble background had outperformed years of elite effort. By the afternoon, Lena arranged a private meeting with Victor. She didn't plead. She didn't argue. She simply laid out the facts. The system had been fixed. Malik's solution was flawless. He had worked quietly, unnoticed, driven by curiosity and integrity, and had succeeded where billions had failed. Victor remained impassive for long moments, absorbing the reality of the situation. Finally, he spoke, voice low but firm. "He's exceptional, but exceptional people like him are dangerous if uncontrolled. We need to ensure he's guided, not exploited." Lena nodded. "Exactly, not controlled, recognized, supported. He deserves guidance, yes, but above all, respect. You can't erase this, Victor, and you shouldn't try." Renee, watching from the side, felt a swell of relief. The tension that had haunted her through the night lifted slightly. For once, the world had seen Malik, not as a child, not as a maid's son, but as someone capable of changing the course of events with intellect, courage, and integrity. Over the next weeks, Malik's life subtly transformed. He began to work under Lena's mentorship in the lab during after-school hours. He learned advanced systems engineering, coding, and problem-solving techniques that had once seemed unreachable. Each success built his confidence. Each recognition reinforced his worth. Yet even as opportunities opened, Malik remained grounded. He never sought fame, nor did he crave recognition. His focus remained the same: understanding, solving, and doing what was right. It was this quiet integrity that won the loyalty of engineers and colleagues and gradually softened even Victor Harrow's hard edges. Renee continued to work nights, but she no longer feared bringing Malik along. Technova quietly adjusted policies, allowing her son to remain in the lab under supervision. It wasn't a public acknowledgement. It didn't need to be. But it was a tacit understanding that Malik's place in the company was no longer invisible. The boardroom eventually convened to discuss the system and Malik's solution. Executives, engineers, and even Victor himself had to acknowledge the truth. The system was fixed, stable, and reliable. The child's contribution had prevented potential disaster. For Malik, this was not a victory of ego or money. It was validation of his mind, his patience, his quiet persistence in the shadows. One evening, Malik and his mother stood together in the quiet lab, looking over the glowing monitors. He held his notebook, the pages worn and filled with his careful calculations. She smiled softly. "You've changed everything, Malik, not just for them, for you, for us." Malik nodded, eyes focused on the screen, absorbing the hum of the servers like a heartbeat. "I just wanted to make it right," he whispered. "I didn't know it would matter this much." Renee squeezed his hand. "It does matter, you matter, and now the world sees it too." Outside, Victor Harrow watched from his office. For the first time, he considered a world in which brilliance existed outside his control, beyond wealth, beyond privilege, beyond his assumptions. It was uncomfortable, threatening, yet undeniable. And though he would never admit it openly, he had learned a lesson. The value of talent could not be measured by status, skin color, or expectation. In the quiet of the lab, surrounded by humming servers and glowing screens, Malik realized something profound. For years, he had hidden in shadows, unseen, underestimated. Now he had touched something much bigger than himself. And in doing so, he had changed lives, not through aggression, not through deceit, but through quiet intelligence, courage, and integrity. He wasn't a child hiding in a closet anymore. He was a mind, a talent, a force to be reckoned with, and the world finally had begun to see it. Sometimes the world judges too quickly. It sees a child, a maid's son, a face that doesn't fit the expectation, and it assumes the worst. It measures worth by wealth, skin color, or status, not by courage, intelligence, or integrity. But brilliance cannot be hidden forever. True talent, when driven by curiosity and a desire to do what is right, shines brighter than prejudice, louder than doubt, and stronger than fear. Malik's story reminds us that greatness often comes from the most unexpected places. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or demand attention. It emerges quietly, patiently in the shadows, waiting for someone to notice, or sometimes to survive long enough to prove it. His courage, not in defiance but in understanding, his intelligence, not in arrogance but in action, changed an entire empire, and it began with nothing more than a child's curiosity and a mother's love. Renee, who worked tirelessly for survival, understood something essential. Protecting and nurturing potential can shape futures, even when the world refuses to see it. She reminded us that opportunity isn't always given. It is created, safeguarded, and sometimes discovered in hidden corners. And Malik, who could have faltered under judgment, instead turned scrutiny into purpose. He taught those around him a lesson far bigger than technical skill. The measure of a person is in how they choose to use their gifts, not how the world measures them. Victor Harrow, the billionaire who first saw only a child to dismiss, learned what too few ever do. Brilliance cannot be confined by prejudice. Power can control resources, but it cannot command genius. Respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And sometimes the most profound changes come from the least expected sources. If there is one truth to take away, it is this: never underestimate someone because of where they come from, what they wear, or the life they lead. Courage, intelligence, and heart do not respect barriers. They transcend them. And those who have the vision to see talent in the overlooked, the compassion to nurture it, and the humility to learn from it, will witness miracles the world never expected. Malik's accidental solution wasn't just a fix to a system. It was a reminder that potential exists everywhere, waiting for recognition, waiting for opportunity, waiting for justice. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to believe in the power of hidden brilliance, and in the truth that one small act, one quiet mind, one courageous heart can change everything.